Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today's Wildcard Sunday, so we are looking at something a little bit off the beaten path, a little bit out of left field, and today that book is HEDRA by Jesse Lonergan. A few things to keep in mind. First of all, I am a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. I'm a huge fan of 2001 A Space Odyssey. I feel that Jesse Lonergan probably is as well. So there's a certain kinship here, I think, within this book, visually and kind of thematically, with 2001 A Space Odyssey. I'm not saying it's any kind of a ripoff or anything like that, but I think it takes a little bit of inspiration for sure, from that movie. One of the aspects of that movie that I really dig is the fact that it is almost wordless. There is a bit of dialogue, but it's very minimal and kept to a minimum as well, for all, just what you need to know, basically, to help the story along. So it's just the bare minimum. And that whole movie is mostly told through the visuals, which is very much akin to comic books, right? If you ask, people about the age-old debate of art versus story in comic books, I guess you'll get different answers and varying answers depending on who you ask, right? If you ask a writer, they'll probably say it's story. If you ask an artist, they'll probably say it's the art. If you ask a cartoonist who does both, I still think the majority of them will tell you that it's probably the art. It's a visual medium. That's what attracts us first. So, for example, for this comic here, what attracted me first to it was this cover here, which is quite different, I think, from the typical kind of stuff you'll see on most comic books. So already the different design and look and composition to this is what attracted me to it. And that kind of basic thematic design here of all these smaller panels is going to obviously influence pretty much the layout on all the pages in the story. And like 2001, or even maybe pushing it further, this comic is completely wordless, no dialogue, and I really appreciate that. Because again, talking about the fact that it's a visual medium, the more, at least my philosophy is when I'm creating my own comics, the more you can tell the story on the visual side of things through the images and stuff, and the less you have to explain with dialogue, word balloons, narration, all that, the better. So I really try to keep things as visual as possible and only dialogue when it's strictly needed, right? That's not to say that I've ever done a wordless comic. I'm not there yet. Haven't tried that. I'd like to at some point. It's a very interesting challenge. But it's a challenge that in this case, Jesse Lonergan has really pulled off. I think it's a really good book. The storytelling is clear and concise as it needs to be when there are no words, right? So everything is told through the visuals. So when we go through this book, it's kind of my reading of it. I might be off from what the author intended. It might be different from what other people will interpret it as, but this is just how I'm going to read it, and we're going to crack it open and see what I think about this. That looks about centered. So I don't think the story necessarily starts, I could be wrong, but I don't think it starts with the cover. The cover kind of sets the tone though, and I do think definitely the story starts here, right? And clever use of just a simple illustration that doesn't take much time, but the graphic sense is what really makes these kind of beginning pages really work with the narrative, because the story starts right away, right here. And again, I'm going to interpret, but so what I'm assuming here is one bomb has started a strike with a missile, right? Which leads to a nuclear explosion, right? And then from the other direction, we start getting missiles. We get another nuclear explosion. And then we have a proliferation of all of these and more nuclear reactions, and I guess a train reaction of nuclear explosions. And of course, like, the way, again, that he's using the layout and this repetitive grid here in various different ways. And you see the different trajectories, and there's few trajectories. There's one trajectory, there's two, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down here there's even more, and it starts to multiply, right? So visually telling the story very cleanly, very simply, and it's very clear. So just more of that on a smaller scale for more storytelling, and of course that has led to some sort of nuclear Armageddon. We get an image here, it's one big image but split amongst all these panels here. Of a farmer, I guess, trying to plant some seeds, but this color implies the nuclear, destruction, the fallout. So symbolically, how I view it is, any food or anything that's going to come from the ground here is going to lead to death. And all of this really is just leading us down into the ground and into death. And again, all told, visually very simple, very effective, and I think very clear. kind of a visual artistic trick here, pulling these guys into the foreground by making them be in front of the panels here where they are. And again, that just helps create more of a sense of depth in this image. So again, I'm going to assume, obviously, Washington's in shambles. You know, we got to do something. The war room, again, if we're talking about Kubrick, you know, that's a straight up shot from How I Learned to Love the Bomb. I forget his name. I can't believe this, but great movie. It's in black and white. Check it out. Stanley Kubrick's a genius, and Jesse Lonergan, as I said, this kind of confirms it that he's definitely a fan. So we get kind of a technical diagram of this ship here. So some scientists kind of explaining, well, we're going to send a ship off to somewhere to do something, right? So we don't exactly know what, but we're going to have to assume it's to help with, you know, this nuclear Armageddon and getting life on Earth back on track and hopefully making sure the survivors survive. So there's a ship waiting, you know, the sun's rising and people waiting around in line. She gets a number. Oh, this is familiar, right? If you've ever seen this kind of shows on lottery shows on TV. So this is some sort of lottery, and they're picking who's, I guess, going to go on the rocket. So this young lady here is the one who's been elected to do that. I don't know if people are vying for that or didn't want to win. They look a little bit angry here. Maybe they're a little bit jealous. I'm not quite sure. Don't know how dangerous, obviously, this mission is meant to be. And we have takeoff. And again, just the clever use of the same grid over and over, but, you know, cut up into different size panels, insets, right? Like he really finds very clever ways to play with that basic grid. Circular panels that kind of reflect what's going on here, right? Yeah, very good graphic sense, right? Simple and effective. Even this, I love how, you know, the vertical panel, everything makes graphic sense and the story is told simply and effectively. And here we just have, you know, the use of symbols. I have to assume, once again, some of these shapes, you know, if you've ever seen the, again, I'm going to talk about 2001 Space Odyssey, the sequence, you know, where he goes through the interdimensional vortex or whatever you want to call it, tunnel, and you get these kind of shapes floating in space and kind of a psychedelic, you know, pass of the movie, you know, the close-up of the eye, very reminiscent of that as well. Not quite sure what this is all meant to mean here. There's a maze, so it's complicated. There's a maze of places you could go. You know, just, I guess, science is what's reflected here, and like going through fields and anything and everything, I guess, symbolically that's associated with space travel, right? Or I guess that's I feel like that's what's the artist is trying to evoke here. Exploration, right? Like, you know, this here, I'm not quite sure, but evokes to me like maybe ancient maritime maps, right? Of new worlds. You've got the constellations, right? Like, it's all, I'd like to know, because I know it's all thought out. Some of this is instrumentation, right, in the spaceship. That makes sense. But all of this has been thought about for sure. Like, each shape has been chosen, and I'd love to know what the creator, the cartoonist himself, was thinking, you know. But you know, I feel like it evokes probably what he wants, right? And I don't think he wants it to be that specific necessarily. Well, maybe it is. So this is clever too, right? As we're going from panel to panel and cutting through, you know, we're getting a sense that she's going from planet to planet, and she seems to be collecting plants. So that would make sense. So now we can assume that, you know, her job is to go to plants that are healthy and bring back, you know, nutrients, food, seeds that could be useful on Earth, right? So that's what's told in this, you know, simple and effective, you know, use of the grid here, and just simple storytelling images. Again, no words. So on one of her trips, it seems, from one planet to the other, we have kind of a guest here, right, following her. And look at the way the, you know, the storytelling cuts through. It's so interesting and so graphic, but so clear and so easy to understand. Like, this page I just find so clever. This one too. Each page in and of itself, if you sit there and just kind of, you know, study the design, the layout, and how it's done, it's so precise and it's so effective. So she's in her ship, and basically what she sees is some sort of alien, possibly a robot, you know, possibly an alien robot, I guess you could say. I love what's going on here. Not quite sure what it is. Is it him putting out lights or signals or something, trying to communicate with her? Maybe. That's kind of maybe how I'm reading it. I don't think it has to do with the propulsion, because we had that before. So I feel like he's leaving things in space that are meant to be symbols, you know, him trying to communicate. And then here all of a sudden, we can assume they're looking at each other, even though they're not, you know, horizontally laid together. There's a symmetry there. Again, I'm going to bring in Stanley Kubrick and 2001 and most of his movies in symmetry, right? So there is definitely, across a lot of this book, a lot of intentional symmetry. And HEDRA, so I don't know if that's her name, that's his name, it's if that's some sort of concept, right? It is the name of the book, and it's a clever visual way to remind us, I guess. But, you know, a lot is left unsaid, and a lot is mysterious, but I still just love the storytelling, the graphic sense. Again, look how interesting these pages are, right? And you can track all of these. It all makes sense. It's, you know, if you follow this, you'll end up with their little robot buddy. Even though we don't see him here, we know that's him. We know that's him here. You know, he's established the graphic representation, right? So bigger or smaller, we still understand that that's our robot character. And again, if we're talking about symmetry, you get somewhat, you know, a version of symmetry here on across these pages here. A lot of psychedelic shapes, really, if you kind of really pay attention. And the fact that, you know, they're both going to the same thing here. She seems upside down, he seems right side up, or maybe he's upside down, she's right side up, who knows. So we see her, you know, landing normally, and this guy, our robot buddy, everything's upside down here. So once again, that's symmetry, representing, of course, that they've landed on opposite sides of the planet. Very clever visually. And again, another aspect of this is once you know, do this, you slow down time a little bit, right? And you can have characters moving through time through panels, which totally works, you know, just so it's easy to understand and clear to read. He's lightened, you know, the tones and the colors on those three panels because they're the most important to understand that she's climbed down. But everything leads you to slowing down, taking the time and looking at everything and understanding what's going on and the storytelling, and it's clear. You have more of it here, right? Her popping out. This whole sequence here. And always with that same basic layout of that grid, right? What a great panel here. And playing with those panels and playing with time, right? Using those to great effect, graphic effect, but the passage of time. So she gets sucked under. Ends up down here. Pops out, and now we get to see our robot character, who it seems, I think, has the ability to grow. That's what's kind of being represented here. These circles kind of giving that sense of things moving outward, and in this case growing. Just this whole bit of storytelling here is amazing. And very well done and very easy to understand. It's the clarity of it that's amazing to me. Just talk real quick about the coloring too. Perfect choice of actual colors. Uses a lot of flat colors, but judicious choice of colors. Again, keeping it simple and clear, but you know, somewhat otherworldly and slightly psychedelic in the color choice. And when he does use like a primary, like a red, obviously it's to have something really pop out. So it seems like on this planet we've got these, you know, inhabitants, right? And they're kind of warlike and they've got weapons and they're feeling threatened, I guess, by this giant robot character. So they blow out his robot guts here, right? Unfortunately. And they gather him up, and as we can see, he is pretty darn big. Then it's confirmed here, right? And our other character, well, she's, you know, trying to get away from these red dwellers, I guess I'll call them. You know, these inhabitants of this planet. Again, the color helps it, makes it easy to follow. She's kind of an orangey tone, they're red, right? The background is light. Very easy to follow the action, what's going on. That grid, once again, like even here, it's like the way the grid is created, you know, the way he's cleverly directing your eye with these curves here in different directions, and the art within and the environment within is even helping that sense and, you know, of illusion, I guess you could say, because when you're drawing, you're just creating illusions on paper, really. That's what you're doing, right? So just the many different ways he uses that grid for storytelling, for leading the eye, for interesting design. It's really well done, really well thought out. So our character here in this kind of crystalline cave finds a sword. Now we see that this kind of like a Gulliver's Travels kind of influence here. So I guess these characters are going to start picking off pieces of this robot, right? And look how it's implied. Again, they're showing them, you know, using their tools and stuff and playing around with parts of his body, and then just these kind of silhouetted out gears, for lack of a better term, right? And pulleys and stuff. That I just love the way the simple storytelling with these silhouettes of the pulleys just kind of really explains everything, right? You don't have to keep drawing this in every panel. Very clever. Establishing shot is amazing, right? Once again, if we're talking about that symmetry in the layout, just awesome. I love all of this. So she kind of comes up on this scene here. What's going on with this? I guess this is our top baddie with the red people. Some sort of decree, or, you know, and here she comes in, mirroring what we saw earlier with the spaceship and our robot, right? So he's repeating some of those patterns for different uses. Very clever visual. She cuts his arm off. Cuts his other arm off, and basically here, I love, again, the use, the way he's done this here. You really have to think this out so that it makes sense and is understood, right? So the movement does this, brings us down here, right? This is the direction we should be going, right? And from here, shoot, she cuts that string that makes this fall here. So like there's so many directions, and the way he's manipulating time and your reading direction, again, is just completely different from the page before, right? And then again, you get one of those images split up into multi-panels, which I always like, because really what you can do is then focus on some individual characters a bit more than if it was just one big image, right? And a sequence of events. Finally, he wakes up, bumps his head, realizes where he is, or at least that he's in a small space compared to his size, shrinks down. These guys attack him, and I like this kind of visual representation for the punch here. Even the fact that it gets moved over in each panel just adds to the disconcerting effect, I guess, of the hit. More interesting uses of those panels in negative space, right? I didn't talk that much about negative space, but man, he's a master of that too. Like this here, this is, you know, that's the white of the page, right? That panel is not actually a panel. It's the white of the page. This, I think, is super clever. Not sure. Should that have been erased? I don't know. I'm not going to question it, because if that's the only thing in this whole book, it doesn't bother me that much. I would have maybe either brought it in a bit more or had it open here. Maybe he tried that. I'd be curious to know as to why that was the final decision. There's got to be a reason for it. And I'll remind you once again that he's still always using that simple basic layout of all these small panels, and so effective. No two pages seem to be alike. Just awesome. Even here, we can feel that that's the white of the page, right? It's almost like he's drawn all this and that's not part of the page, and he just threw a few characters in. His design sense is pretty awesome. So more visual representation here of space travel, similar to before, but probably even crazier. The color choice and stuff's a little bit different. Just beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Again, that that symmetry that I like, that Kubrickian symmetry. You know, very geometric here. Lots, you know, very almost video gamey logic Tron, Qbert. This scene is awesome. Once again, using that white of the page there as a storytelling element, as the actual panel. I love this kind of stuff. Beautiful. So I guess she's meant to then fill a void here, right? Is that what? That's what I assume from what I can see here. She's becoming, or was chosen to become, one of them, whatever they are, right? And they all seem to be represented by a different shape or symbol that we saw earlier, right? In her early space travel pages. So it seems like this shape here is bequeathed her, and these elements here lead kind of credence to what I was saying about this being some sort of communication graphic, or whether, you know, this is sound. Is it a visual thing that she actually sees? What is that exactly? Again, I'm just going to assume it's some sort of form of communication, understanding that he's trying to get through to her. And then she realizes that, just like him and these others, she's part of that. So she thinks back home, the nuclear Armageddon, right, that we saw earlier. And I guess she figures out that now she can do something about it, right? At least, again, that's the sense that I get. So she flies off from this geometric world. I love this here. Once again, if like we can compare, that page has been used again, but that's fine. Right? So it's probably a perfect match, at least this top part here to this top part there. See where he uses it with all the different little panels, the effect you get there, right? A lot more time probably going on here, the sense of time compared to this, right? Even though that's a great image, we're probably going to spend less time on this and move on when we're readers. So here we get kind of a replay of the elements and some of the stuff that we saw earlier, right, from her travels away from Earth. And of course, if we follow that, you know, shining ray of light that we now know is not the robot but her, that visual representation of her coming towards Earth. And she falls down to Earth, right? And of course, this red implying still that nuclear fallout and death. You know, this symbol comes back of the people buried underground, dead people, skeletons. And focus on her. Obviously, she's trying something here. She's having some of the plants, or I guess her powers or something she's collected. And she's basically, I guess you could call it, terraforming the Earth once again with these odd alien plants. And it does happen pretty quickly. And again, the use of color is pretty clever here, because as you can see, everything starts to go from red to yellow, and the yellow starts to overtake the red. And of course, her job now is done on Earth, so off into space she goes for what's possibly going to be her next mission. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the shape of the plants here, right? That's also the shape of the geometric pattern she was given here. So he really uses the symbols throughout this whole thing effectively. Again, throughout the storytelling, throughout the layouts, the design sense is amazing. And this is just kind of a buried treasure that I don't think a lot of people know about, and I think needs to have more attention brought to it, because it's just a great book. It's a one and done, you know, one-shot story, so definitely worth the admission price for this one. So there you go. That is HEDRA by Jesse Lonergan. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please comment below. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet. It's what helps us put out more videos. And I hope everyone out there has themselves an awesome day.
Like! Subscribe! Like! Subscribe!
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13. 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.